Kirsty Luck, and the CEO of Ipsos, Alex Gehan.
My name is George Slumpo. I'm the senior editor at the Trade Desk. Previously, I was the tech reporter for 5 years at Ad Age. And today, we're going to talk about cookies. You guys may have heard they're going away. I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves.
Sure, yes, thank you, George. I'm Alex Gehan. I head Ipsos in France. Ipsos is a global market research company with close to 18,000 researchers. And digital activation of all the marketing research we do is something that is a real trend and point of difference for us. So I'm very happy to talk about that in a cookieless environment.
Thank you. I'm Kristen Luck. I am the president of ESOMAR, which is a global association that represents insights and analytics professionals and ensures data ethics globally. And in addition to that, serial marketing tech entrepreneur, advisor, and investment banker.
So, just to get the conversation started, we know cookies are going away. What does the current landscape look like today? Because Google delayed the deprecation of third-party cookies from its browser for 2 years. Kristen, looks like you have something to share.
Well, yeah, I think we were joking around when we did our pre-call that everyone loves cookies for dessert, but at some point in your life, you want something else besides cookies, and so that's the environment we find ourselves in now. I mean, I think the landscape of cookies as it stands today is really different than when it first started. Originally cookies were designed with individual websites to be able to track information and to be able to offer more relevant products and services and gather data on that singular website. But how that's changed over time, obviously, is that your identity is being tracked over multiple websites. Your behaviors are being tracked across every website that you're using on the internet. And people have varying levels of tolerance and a right to privacy. And so I'll use this as an example, and because it's a statistic that for some reason has kind of stuck in my head, which is, when you look at the amount of internet usage that has gone up during the pandemic, one of the big winners of online browsing has been Pornhub. They went up to 19, I think they went to like 19 million users in 2 days, and now 120 million people a day are accessing Pornhub. And so you think if you want all your activity tracked across all your browsers, I would keep that in the back of your mind as an example of the power of cookies.
Yeah, cookies are powerful. They're scalable. They're easy to use. It's a quick fix, I think, for some type of targeting. What I find interesting also is how consumer sentiment is evolving. We were speaking about the right to privacy, and of course the data varies by country depending on if you're in the US or California or Europe. But today, 1 adult out of 3 is kind of okay with sharing this amount of private information, which means two-thirds are not, right? That will change over time. It shifts from roughly 1 or 2 points each year, but we're still a long way from everyone being okay with sharing all of their private information.
Let me ask you this. You said, cookies are scalable, they're an easy fix. I don't know if you guys in the audience know this, but cookies were actually made by Netscape engineers to keep track of what you left in your shopping cart.
Right.
They weren't made for the complexities of digital advertising. So, I mean, is it a good or a bad thing that we're getting rid of cookies from a marketer's perspective?
Well, I think there's a wonderful opportunity to do a better job at this targeting for sure. We'll see what norms actually emerge from that. We'll have less private information for sure. We need to find ways to better track that across platform, across screens. That's also for sure. But what we're seeing when I speak to clients, which are all the biggest advertisers in the world, there are 2 things that are maybe a bit missing in the digital ad space. One is the power of creative, which isn't as thorough, I would say, as on other channels. And 2, the companies already have a mass of consumer understanding. And it's very difficult to combine that with an actual ad targeting strategy or a digital activation strategy, so to speak. Bringing the two together, and you can talk a bit more as to what that means, is probably the way to go to drive more engagement.
Kristen, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think, this is in part why we're seeing kind of the rise of these data as a service companies, and you've got companies like Distillery that are based out of New York to build the audience profiles that are providing, like, I think more comprehensive, landscapes of like consumers' behavior that go beyond what you could normally get with cookies, because they're also using some predictive modeling techniques or startups like hypermetrics that are basically touting the zero-party data. So I think there's a lot of different solutions that are coming online that I think will actually enhance what advertisers are able to do.
Very good. One of the reasons cookies worked in digital advertising for so long is because they were a neutral currency. No one owned them. And what we're seeing right now with the looming death of third-party cookies is you have a bunch of these companies all racing to make their own identity solutions. Some of them are proprietary. So in other words, they want to make a little bit of money off of creating the next identity solution, which kind of invites the question. I mean, do you guys think that there's going to be one identity solution to rule them all, or will it be a cohort of identity solutions? Kristen?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be one identity solution. And I say that because I think, when we use the internet, we have multiple personalities on the internet. How I use LinkedIn, if I present myself on LinkedIn, is very different than how I present myself on Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram. Like, those are just two totally different profiles for me. I also think that, to Alexander's point earlier, the privacy piece of it is a big component when you look at things globally. The U.S. has always traditionally kind of been the wild west of data privacy up until we had CCPA, which I think launched maybe a year or two ago. And the U.S. is a very business-led privacy country. You look at the EU, it's a very citizen-led privacy country. You have to opt in. There's GDPR and a lot of data ethics and protection components in place. And then you can even look at like China, where it's very government controlled, and that's a whole different kind of situation. So no, I'm not a big believer that there's just going to be one identity solution that covers the whole span of the globe.
I agree, Kristen, and at least not anytime soon. And when you look at the history of audience measurement and monetization across other types of platforms, it's always taken a long time for everyone to get around the table and come up with a currency. Basically, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? And usually it's very kept at a local market level. Regulations are different by country. They will remain different. In some countries, or like the US, it's actually different by state. So we're a very long way from having a consensus of basically an industry body getting together and agreeing on how we define currency. And until you have that, it's going to be very hard to achieve.
Definitely. And, we've heard privacy mentioned a handful of times already throughout this conversation. And one of the things that I wonder about, cookies, we're getting rid of them to allegedly bolster privacy, but, is that what we're going to see once cookies expire? Kristen?
I don't think so. I think it's just the same kind of situation with GDPR. GDPR is meant to protect our privacy, but in order, for example, I lived half of my life in Greece. In order to access Google, every time I access Google in Greece, I'm asked to opt in and give them permission to track my behavior in order to use Google. And so if I want to be able to use the apps, the website, the things that I want to, I have to give them permission. I think the benefit, to the laws of cookies is like, yeah, maybe we are now like allowing people to be more permissive about their, to make decisions about where they want their privacy protected and where they don't. However, I think we're also going to see a lot more people not being able to access things unless they're willing to give up that privacy in order to get it.
Alex, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and as we see, the majority of adults in the developed world still have issues with that. Absolutely. And that trend is slowly shifting. It's 1 or 2 percentage point each year. So the trend is there, but we still have a couple of decades in front of us.
So, with GDPR, there were certainly winners and there were losers. who are going to be some of the winners when cookies expire? Alex?
I hope it will be the consumer. I think we live in a space that's very crowded, where the actual targeting capability, if you look at it, is very uneven in terms of actual performance. I think consumers want that relevance that they were promised, which they seldom actually get. And I think it's an opportunity for all advertisers. We know today, cookies or not, or FLoC, or whatever targeting mechanism or protocol you go with, is that there's probably even more lift to be had by putting different sets of data, first party, but also consumer data, consumer understanding data, to make just better advertising, to make more engaging advertising. And we know we get better click-through rates when you do that. So it's not only the question of what is the right targeting protocol, it's what's the right ad at the right person at the right time. I feel there's an opportunity to get back to some of the basics. And by focusing on that, you can probably recover from what you would lose by not using these.
You know, I somewhat agree with that too. It's hard, like as consumers, it's like, you know, you want everything for free, but in order for things to be free, if you're not getting relevant advertising, you're just going to see more ads, and the user experience is going to be a lot worse. So it's kind of like this push and pull, but you know, I don't know if necessarily consumers see it that way, or at least the majority of them. Kristen, you know, what are your thoughts? Who are going to be some of the winners?
I mean, I think much like GDPR, the big companies are going to be the winners. The Facebooks, the Googles, they've had these walled gardens for years. They collect a ton of data. It's not going to impact them at the same level as a smaller company. And using GDPR as an example, a lot of the big research companies, Ipsos, for example, have a lot of resources and financial resources to become GDPR compliant very, very easily. And at ESOMAR, we actually started a service for smaller research firms to figure out how do you become compliant without having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees to figure that out. And so I think it's going to be the same thing with cookies, but to a greater degree, in that the big internet companies, the big publishers that have these kind of walled gardens already going are going to benefit. And the smaller companies that have not had this chance to collect data are not going to have that war chest of resources in order to effectively compete. So some of those companies will just die, and some will really, really struggle to play catch up.
I also somewhat agree with you too, and for you in the audience, we have a realist and we have an optimist. I think that's going to win.
I'm
consumers. I mean, it's hard to disagree. We saw it with GDPR. Let me ask this. I mean, first-party data, that's a word that everyone in this audience has heard. Brands need more first-party data. They need to have a direct relationship with their consumer. And one of the interesting trends that we've seen this year is, retailers like Walmart, for instance, are now an advertising company. Lowe's, they provide home improvement. They're an advertising company. Instacart, Uber, they're all getting into this space. So I guess given the emphasis on first-party data, is it just a matter of time before every consumer-facing brand becomes an advertising company? I'll kick it off to you, Kristen.
I don't know about an advertising company. I mean, I think Walmart's a really unique example because they really incent people to use their app. If you're in a Walmart shopping, they're pushing content and deals, and they're using it in multiple ways to drive buyers to their site. Now, whether or not they, are using that for other purposes outside of Walmart, or they choose to sell to other providers, that's to be seen. I'm sure they probably will. Much like in the research industry, I think there's a lot of cross-pollination between respondent panels, data panels. I think it'll be the same on the advertising side, where if you've got a walled garden or you've got a significant database of consumers, that you might be able to share it with a collaborator or competitor in order to gain a more holistic profile of consumer behavior.
I see two interesting use cases, and if I take the case of Walmart, use case number one is driving customer loyalty, getting them to buy more with the brand, and use case number two is actually winning consumers from the competition. First-party data will definitely help you in the first case. I'm not sure to what extent it'll actually help you in the second, right? When you're in a competitive market where demands are shifting and the pandemic that we're just barely coming out of has been a fundamental shift in consumer behavior around the world. This is at moments like this that market shares are made or lost. So I would strongly encourage any brand not to look only at first-party data. Our biggest clients, as Ipsos and market research companies, are actually the big tech names. Yeah. The GAFAM, as we say in French, right? They are spending tens of millions of dollars because they fundamentally understand that you can't look at your market just by looking at what your existing consumers are doing with you. You need to have a broader competitive view, and you need to understand what's happening in the market, especially at a time like this.
Somewhat related to that, I'm going to use GDPR again as an example, but anyone who followed GDPR and its rollout, marketers waited until the 11th hour to get up to speed and be compliant. Right now, cookies, they're not going to wait till 2023. And, you see a lot of brands saying, like, we're going to do first-party data, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But, I mean, are marketers going to wait until the 11th hour and continue using cookies for the most part until 2023, until they expire? Alex, I'll let you start.
I think I see different cases with different clients. Some are really trying to combine all of the different data sets together into one big data lake, and that definitely have an impact. But then it's also unclear what the cookie replacement solutions will be and how they will work. Like the Google products, for instance, are not limited to, right? So I think the jury's still out on this one. It's a bit too soon to tell.
Yeah, I think GDPR was a good lesson for a lot of people not to wait to the 11th hour because the fines were pretty significant. And so I do see fortunately, I see a lot more conversation around, okay, now we have this extra time, but maybe let's not waste it and let's be more proactive about finding partnerships and solutions, and particularly for the smaller companies that don't have some of those bigger resources and access to all governments.
So this will be our last question, but as everyone knows, cookies are gone in Safari, they're gone in Firefox, pretty much all the other browsers but Chrome. Was Google's Chrome's decision to delay its phase out of third-party cookies until 2023, was that a good call or a bad call, Kristen?
Well, I mean, I think in large part of this is like, no offense to Google, but I don't think they're so altruistic that they delayed it because there was no benefit to them. I think they realized that a massive rise in e-commerce, how it affected not only many of their partnerships, but also how it could impact their own business and their own revenues. And so I think that's why we're seeing the delay.
Alex, you get the last word.
I think building these walled gardens also means that it takes a lot of time to get agreements with partners as well. So that's driving some delay as well. We'll actually be talking about that in our master class tomorrow on that topic. Yeah.
Thank you. And just for what it's worth on my end, I think if the pandemic didn't happen, I think it would have been a lot more likely that cookies would have expired. But
for sure,
that certainly threw a monkey wrench into everyone's plan. Thank you for all of you who joined us today. I believe that's all we have for today. Thank you.